Elizabeth Grant stood at the viewport of the survey vessel Starseeker, watching the stars drift by. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her blue uniform jacket showed her captain's rank. She frowned as she reviewed the latest reports. On her tablet, something wasn't adding up. "Captain," called Peter Clark from his station. The tall, lanky lieutenant had a puzzled look on his face. "We've got another one. That makes 5 trading ships that have changed course to avoid the Rigel sector." Elizabeth walked over to his console and looked at the tracking data. 5 ships in 3 days, all taking longer routes that burn more fuel. "It doesn't make sense," Peter said, scratching his head. "That sector has no reported hazards." Elizabeth tapped her fingers on the console edge. For the past 6 months, she had noticed a pattern. Alien ships would approach the edges of human space, then suddenly change course. When asked, the alien captains gave vague answers about navigation concerns or unprofitable routes. But the data showed otherwise. "It's like they're afraid to come near us," she muttered. "Maybe we smell bad," joked Olivia Martinez from the science station. The young officer's dark eyes twinkled with humor, but Elizabeth could tell she was just as curious. "Arrange a meeting with Admiral Miller when we dock at Coalition Station Alpha," Elizabeth told Peter. "I want to show him these reports." 3 days later, the Starseeker docked at the massive space station that served as the headquarters for the Galactic Coalition. 8 species had joined this alliance over the past 30 years, with humans being the newest members. The station buzzed with activity as diplomats, traders, and military personnel from all species moved through its wide corridors. Elizabeth entered the grand reception hall where a diplomatic function was underway. Soft blue lights bathed the room and servers carried trays of food and drink suitable for various species. She spotted several Vexari traders in one corner. The tall, thin aliens with their silvery skin and 4 arms were known as skilled merchants. As she approached them, she heard one say to the other in their clicking language, "The human anomaly grows more concerning each cycle." The other Vexari nodded its long head. "The council should investigate before—" They noticed Elizabeth and immediately stopped talking. "Captain Grant," the first Vexari said, switching to the common trade language. "How nice to see you. We were just discussing the quality of the refreshments." Elizabeth smiled politely, though she knew they were lying. "The food is excellent. I was wondering if I could ask you about the trade routes near the Rigel sector. We've noticed ships avoiding that area." The 2 Vexari looked at each other quickly. "Inefficient fuel consumption in that region," one said stiffly. "Nothing more." "I see," Elizabeth said, though she didn't. The Vexari excused themselves shortly. After, Elizabeth was getting a drink when she felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find herself facing a Dornian. The elderly alien's skin was a deep orange, wrinkled with age, and the breathing tubes that lined his neck pulsed slowly. "Captain Grant," the Dornian said in a raspy voice. "I am Ketval, xenobiologist. May we speak privately?" Curious, Elizabeth followed him to a quiet alcove away from the main crowd. "I overheard your questions to the Vexari," Ketval said. "You seek answers about the borders of human space." "I do," Elizabeth admitted. "No one will tell me why alien ships won't enter certain sectors." The old Dornian's large eyes blinked slowly. "Your species occupies what we call the silent sector. For thousands of years, ships have disappeared there. Now you humans thrive where others vanish. Ask yourself why." Elizabeth felt a chill run down her spine. "Are you saying there's something dangerous in our space?" Ketval leaned closer. "I'm saying there's something dangerous about your space that doesn't affect humans. This is why the Coalition was so eager to make an alliance with your kind. Not friendship, Captain. Fear." Before Elizabeth could ask more questions, Ketval was called away by another Dornian. She stood there, processing his words. If alien ships had been disappearing in human space for thousands of years, why hadn't humans ever found evidence of this? Later that evening, Elizabeth met with Admiral Frank Miller in his office. The Admiral was a broad-shouldered man with gray hair and a no-nonsense attitude. "These reports are concerning," Miller said after reviewing her data. "But without more concrete evidence, we can't accuse our allies of hiding information." Sir, the Dornian scientists specifically mentioned ships disappearing in our space, Elizabeth insisted. That suggests they've known about some danger, and didn't warn us when we started exploring. Miller frowned. It could be superstition. Many of these species have been spacefaring for longer than we have. Old stories get passed down. Fears become tradition. With all due respect, Admiral, I don't think... She was interrupted by an urgent beep from Miller's console. A communications officer appeared on screen looking worried. Admiral, we've detected an alien vessel crossing into unexplored human territory near the Prometheus Nebula. It's broadcasting a distress signal. Miller and Elizabeth exchanged surprised looks. This was unprecedented. Can you identify the ship? Miller asked. It's a Gentai science vessel, sir. Heavy damage to its hull. The signal is weak, but they're requesting immediate assistance. Miller turned to Elizabeth. The Starseeker is the closest ship we have to that position. I'm ordering you to investigate. Find out what happened to that ship and why it entered a zone their kind usually avoids. Yes, sir, Elizabeth said, already planning the rescue mission in her head. And Captain, Miller added, his voice grave. Be careful. This might be the evidence you were looking for, but I'm not sure you're going to like what you find. Within an hour, the Starseeker was leaving dock, its engines pushing it toward the unexplored region where the distress call originated. Elizabeth stood on the bridge watching her crew prepare for the journey. Set course for the Prometheus Nebula, she ordered. Maximum speed. As the stars stretched into lines of light around them, Elizabeth couldn't shake Ketval's warning from her mind. No one charts beyond human space because no one comes back. Now someone had tried and they were in trouble. What had the Gentai ship encountered out there? And more importantly, why didn't it affect humans? She had a feeling they were about to find out. The Starseeker dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the edge of the Prometheus Nebula. Swirls of purple and blue gas filled the view screen, lit by the pulsing light of a strange star at the nebula's heart. That's odd, said Olivia from the science station. That star is a pulsar, but its radiation pattern is unlike anything I've seen before. Elizabeth nodded, but kept her focus on the mission. Any sign of the Gentai ship? Yes, Captain, Peter replied. Picking up the distress? Signal. It's coming from the fourth planet in this system. Take us in, but approach with caution, Elizabeth ordered. Shields up. As they moved closer to the planet, they spotted the alien vessel. The Gentai ship was sleek and green, designed for scientific research rather than combat. But now it floated dead in space with large holes torn in its hull. Life signs? Elizabeth asked. Alan Rodriguez, the security chief, checked his console. His broad shoulders tensed as he studied the readings. Very faint. Maybe one or two survivors at most. Elizabeth stood up. We need to board that ship. Peter, you'll lead the away team. Take Olivia and Alan with you. I want to know what happened to them. The team suited up in their space gear and crossed over to the damaged alien ship. Elizabeth watched from the Starseeker as they entered through a torn airlock. The minutes ticked by slowly as she waited for their report. Captain? Peter's voice came through the comm system. It's a massacre in here. Elizabeth felt her stomach tighten. Explain. The crew is dead. Most of them look like they were trying to escape something. There's no sign of weapons fire, but there are strange marks on the walls, like something cut through the metal with ease. Any survivors? Elizabeth asked. We're picking up a life sign in what seems to be the bridge, Olivia reported. We're heading there now. Elizabeth waited anxiously as the team made their way through the damaged ship. Finally, Peter's voice returned. Captain, we found one survivor. The ship's captain, we think, but he's in bad shape. Bring him back to the Starseeker, Elizabeth ordered. Our medical bay can treat him. An hour later, Elizabeth stood in the medical bay looking down at the injured alien. The Gentai captain was a tall, thin being with green-blue skin and large black eyes. His breathing was shallow, and the ship's doctor looked concerned. I can stabilize him, but his injuries are severe, the doctor said, and there's something else. His brain scans show patterns consistent with extreme fear. Whatever happened, it terrified him. Suddenly, the alien's eyes snapped open. He looked around wildly until his gaze settled on Elizabeth. His hand shot out and grabbed her arm with surprising strength. "You... human," he gasped in the common trade language. "They hunt out here. Collectors. They've been watching you, cataloging. Humans are different. You're the only ones they fear." "Who?" Elizabeth asked urgently. "Who's watching us?" The Gentai captain's grip tightened. "Been watching for centuries. Studying. We thought we could observe safely. We were wrong." His eyes widened suddenly and he let out a strangled sound. Then his grip went slack and he fell back onto the bed. The doctor rushed forward, but after a moment he shook his head. "He's gone, Captain." Elizabeth stood in silence for a moment, processing the alien's final words. Then she tapped her communicator. "Olivia, Peter, I want everything from that ship's computer. Find out what they were doing here." While her team worked on the alien ship, Elizabeth returned to the bridge. She stared at the strange pulsar that dominated the system. Something about it bothered her, but she couldn't put her finger on what. 3 hours later, Olivia and Peter returned with their findings. They gathered in the ship's conference room with Alan and Devon Powell, the ship's engineer. "The Gentai were studying us," Olivia explained, displaying data on the room's screen. "They've been secretly observing human expansion patterns for years. This mission was to chart the borders of human space and understand why we can go where other species can't." "Did they find anything?" Elizabeth asked. Peter nodded. "Just before whatever attacked them, they detected an unusual energy signature shadowing their ship. Something was watching them using some kind of advanced cloaking technology." "The captain mentioned collectors," Elizabeth said. "Any idea what that means?" "Nothing specific in their logs," Olivia replied. "But there's something else. I've been analyzing that pulsar. Its radiation creates a unique pattern that affects neural pathways in most sentient species." Elizabeth leaned forward. "Affects them how?" "It triggers fear responses, disorientation. But human brain patterns are different. We're not affected by it." The room fell silent as they all considered this information. Finally, Devon spoke up. "So there's a natural barrier around human space that scares other species away? That's why no one comes here?" "It explains why alien ships avoid these sectors," Elizabeth said. "But not who or what attacked the Gentai. And why would anyone create a barrier like that around human space?" "Maybe to keep others out," Alan suggested. "Or to keep us in." Elizabeth was about to respond when the ship's alarm suddenly blared. The bridge officer's voice came over the comm system. "Captain, we've lost all communications with Coalition space." They rushed to the bridge. The communications officer looked up with a worried expression. "It just cut off, Captain. No static, no interference. It's like something is blocking all signals." "Run diagnostics," Elizabeth ordered. "Check for equipment failure." "Already did," the officer replied. "Everything's working. Something outside the ship is blocking us." Suddenly, the secondary sensor officer called out, "Captain, I'm detecting multiple objects on an intercept course." "Show me," Elizabeth said, moving to his station. The officer brought up the sensor display. Several objects were approaching the Starseeker at high speed. "Where did they come from?" Elizabeth asked. "They weren't there a minute ago. They just appeared, Captain," the officer said, confusion clear in his voice. "1 second, nothing then. Shields to maximum," Elizabeth ordered. "Battle stations." As the crew scrambled to their positions, Elizabeth returned to her captain's chair. The main view screen. She could now see what was approaching them. 3 sleek black vessels, unlike any ship she had ever seen, were moving toward the Starseeker. They seemed to absorb the light around them, making their edges hard to focus on. "No response to hails," the communications officer reported. "Weapons ready," Alan reported from his station. Elizabeth held up her hand. "Hold fire unless they attack. First." The black ship slowed as they approached, forming a triangle around the Starseeker. They made no aggressive moves but simply held position. "Now what?" Peter whispered. Elizabeth stared at the strange ships. "Now we find out who's been watching us all this time. Minutes turned into hours as the black ships continued to surround the Starseeker. They made no moves to attack, but they also didn't respond to any attempts at communication. "They're just watching us," Alan said from his security station. His hand hovered near the weapons controls. "Like we're some kind of lab experiment." Elizabeth paced the bridge, trying to hide her nervousness from the crew. "Keep trying all frequencies. There must be some way to talk to them." "Captain," said Olivia, "I've been analyzing their ships. They're absorbing our scan signals. That's why they look so dark. They don't reflect light or energy." "Any idea who built them?" Elizabeth asked. Olivia shook her head. "Nothing like this exists in Coalition records. The technology is far beyond anything we've seen." The communications officer suddenly straightened in his chair. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission." "Put it through," Elizabeth ordered, returning to her captain's chair. At first there was only a strange humming noise. Then a voice spoke in a language no one recognized, a series of musical tones and clicks. The ship's computer worked to translate, but before it could finish, the voice switched to perfect English. "Specimen humans have progressed ahead of schedule. Assessment protocol activated." The bridge crew exchanged worried glances. Elizabeth leaned forward. "This is Captain Elizabeth Grant of the Earth Survey vessel Starseeker. Who are you, and what do you want with us?" There was a long pause. Then the air in the middle of the bridge began to shimmer. The security team drew their weapons as a figure materialized before them. It was tall and slender with smooth silver skin that seemed to flow like liquid. Its head was slightly larger than a human's, with multifaceted eyes that shimmered with all the colors of the rainbow. "Hold your fire," Elizabeth ordered, standing up slowly. The being made no threatening moves. It simply observed them with those strange eyes. "I am Observer 9, the being said, its mouth not moving as the words seemed to form directly in their minds. "I represent the collectors." "Why have you surrounded our ship?" Elizabeth asked. "To study your response," Observer 9 replied. "You did not flee or attack." "Interesting." Alan stepped forward. "Were you responsible for the attack on the Gentai vessel?" The silver being turned its gaze to him. "The non-humans violated boundary protocols. They were warned." Elizabeth felt a cold feeling in her stomach. "You killed them for coming into this region of space?" "Most were collected for study," Observer 9 corrected. "This is standard procedure for boundary violations." "And why haven't you collected us?" Peter asked. Observer 9 turned in a complete circle, looking at each human on the bridge. "Humans are different. You exist in spaces that cause other species distress. You think in patterns we cannot predict. For the first time in 7 million cycles, we have encountered a species that requires new classification protocols." Elizabeth tried to process what she was hearing. "Are you saying you've been studying life forms for millions of years?" "The collectors maintain the galactic taxonomy," Observer 9 explained. "We establish nature preserves where promising species can develop without interference. Human space is one such preserve." "Those pulsars," Olivia said suddenly. "You engineered them to keep other species away from us, didn't you?" Observer 9 made a gesture that might have been approval. "The neural barriers are effective for 97.3% of catalogued sentient species. Only humans show complete immunity to their effects." Elizabeth's mind raced as she fit the pieces together. "So you've been watching us evolve, keeping other species away from our sector of space. Why?" "All promising species receive observation periods," Observer 9 said. "Most are eventually guided toward productive roles in the galactic ecosystem." "Guided?" Elizabeth repeated. "Or controlled?" Observer 9's skin rippled slightly. "Optimization is not control. It is efficiency." "And what happens to species that don't fit your optimization plans?" Elizabeth asked. There was a long pause. "They are archived." Peter stepped closer to Elizabeth. "I don't like the sound of that." Observer 9 continued as if he hadn't spoken. "Humans have developed a trait we call pattern-breaking cognition. You solve problems in ways our prediction models cannot anticipate. This makes you potentially valuable, or potentially dangerous. Which do you think we are? Elizabeth asked quietly. That is what we are currently debating, Observer 9 replied. The Collectors Council has been monitoring human expansion with increasing concern. Some believe your unpredictability makes you a threat to galactic order. Others see potential for evolution beyond current parameters. The silver being moved closer to Elizabeth. The attack on the alien vessel was not random. We needed to draw a human ship to this location. You wanted us here? Elizabeth felt anger rising in her chest. Innocent beings died for that. Their neural patterns were preserved before biological termination, Observer 9 said, as if that made it better. The Council requires direct interaction with humans. You and your crew will represent your species at the assessment. And if we refuse? Alan asked, his hand moving back to his weapon. Observer 9 turned those rainbow eyes to him. Refusal is not a productive option. Your vessel cannot escape, and we require answers. Elizabeth held up her hand to signal Alan to stand down. What kind of assessment? The Council will determine if humans should be guided, contained, or... Observer 9 paused. Archived. You're talking about the fate of our entire species, Elizabeth said, trying to keep her voice steady. Based on meeting just us? Efficiency requires sampling, Observer 9 said. You will represent humanity because you are here. The alternative is a more thorough study, which would require collecting many more specimens. Elizabeth exchanged looks with her senior officers. They didn't have much choice. When does this assessment begin? She asked. Observer 9 made a gesture with its long silver fingers. Now. The bridge of the Star Seeker faded around them. Elizabeth felt a strange pulling sensation, as if her body was being stretched in all directions at once. When the sensation passed, they were standing in a vast circular chamber. The wall seemed to be made of flowing light, and in the center was a raised platform surrounded by 7 tall silver beings, similar to Observer 9. Welcome to the Council Chamber, Observer 9 said from behind them. The fate of humanity will now be decided. Elizabeth looked at her crew. Peter, Olivia, Alan, and Devin had all been transported with her. They looked frightened but determined. Stay calm, she told them quietly. Remember, they brought us here because they don't understand us. That gives us an advantage. What's the plan, Captain? Peter whispered. Elizabeth straightened her uniform and faced the Council of Collectors. We show them exactly who humans are. The council chamber was unlike anything Elizabeth or her crew had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of living light that shifted and changed. Above them, stars and galaxies moved in what looked like a real-time map of the universe. 7 tall silver beings sat in a half-circle. They looked similar to Observer 9, but each had subtle differences in the patterns on their skin and the colors in their eyes. The one in the center spoke first. Its voice echoed directly in their minds. I am Archiver Prime, eldest of the Collectors. For 12 billion years we have guided the evolution of life in this galaxy. Elizabeth stepped forward. We didn't ask to be guided. Few species understand what is best for their development, Archiver Prime replied. We have perfected countless civilizations. Observer 9 moved to stand between Elizabeth and the Council. These humans show unusual traits. Their neural patterns resist our influence technology. Another collector leaned forward. Show us the evidence of human development. The air in front of them shimmered, and images began to appear. Elizabeth recognized scenes from human history, ancient civilizations, wars, scientific breakthroughs, art, music, and space exploration. The images moved faster and faster, showing human progress from stone tools to space stations. Observe their aggression, one collector said, highlighting scenes of conflict. They fight even among themselves, yet they learn from failure, another countered, showing how humans rebuilt after disasters. Their resource consumption exceeds sustainable levels, a third collector noted. But they adapt to new environments with remarkable speed, Observer 9. Added Archiver Prime raised a silver hand, and the images froze. Our prediction models show that if human expansion continues unchecked, they will dominate known space within 500 years. This is an unacceptable disruption to our evolutionary program, Olivia whispered to Elizabeth. They've been controlling how species develop throughout the galaxy. They're playing God. Elizabeth nodded slightly, then addressed the council. You say you've been studying life for billions of years. What gives you that right? We were the first, Archiver Prime stated simply. When we achieved sentience, the galaxy was young. We discovered that life often develops along predictable paths. With subtle guidance, species can be directed toward optimal outcomes. And what about species that don't follow your guidance? Alan asked. A wall of the chamber suddenly transformed, showing row upon row of glowing orbs. Inside each orb was what looked like a miniature planet. The archived worlds, Observer 9 explained. Species that presented developmental risks are preserved here in suspended animation. Elizabeth felt sick. You've been freezing entire planets? Preservation is not destruction, Archiver Prime said. When a species proves unsuitable for the galactic community, we archive their world and start anew. Devon Powell had been quiet until now, his engineer's mind taking in the incredible technology around them. He approached one of the walls, studying it closely. Captain, he said in a low voice, their tech is amazing, but I'm seeing patterns. The same designs repeated over and over with minor variations. I think they've been using the same basic technology for millions of years. Elizabeth understood what he was saying. Despite their advanced state, the collectors had stopped innovating. They were stuck in their ways. Observer 9 seemed to notice their quiet conversation. The engineer has made an accurate observation. Our technology reached optimal efficiency 7 million cycles ago. What need is there for change when perfection is achieved? Because without change, there's no growth, Elizabeth replied. And without growth, there's only stagnation. The council stirred at her words. One of them stood up. This human speaks the forbidden concept. The path of unguided change leads to chaos. Or it leads to things you can't predict, Elizabeth countered. Which seems to be what bothers you about humans. Archiver Prime raised a hand again, bringing silence to the chamber. It is time for evidence. We will present the case for human containment. The humans may then defend their species. What followed was like a strange trial. The collectors showed simulations of human expansion across the stars, claiming it would disrupt the careful balance they had maintained for billions of years. They showed examples of human unpredictability leading to conflicts and accidents. When it was Elizabeth's turn to speak, she took a deep breath. You've shown us that you fear our unpredictability. But that's actually our greatest strength. She walked to the center of the chamber. You say your prediction models can't anticipate human actions. That's because we think differently. We try things that seem impossible. We fail, we learn, and we try again in new ways. Elizabeth pointed to the technology around them. As my engineer noticed, your technology hasn't fundamentally changed in millions of years. You've reached what you call perfection and stopped growing. But humans never stop. We're never satisfied with good enough. We always look for better ways, new ideas, different approaches. She walked around the chamber, looking at each collector in turn. You showed us problems your models said were unsolvable. But humans have solved similar problems throughout our history. We don't accept limitations, we find ways around them. Observer 9 moved forward. The human speaks truth. In my observations, I have seen them solve problems through methods our systems calculated as impossible. A debate broke out among the collectors, with some arguing that humans represented the next step in evolution, while others insisted they were a dangerous anomaly that needed to be contained. While the collectors were distracted, Olivia moved close to Elizabeth. Captain, she whispered, I think I can modify my communicator to send a signal back to human space. If I use their own technology as a carrier wave, it might get through their blocks. Elizabeth nodded slightly. Do it. But be careful. As the debate raged on, Olivia worked discreetly on her communicator, tapping into the energy patterns flowing through the chamber walls. The collectors were so focused on their argument that they didn't notice. Finally, Archiver Prime called for order. We will now vote on the fate of humanity. 3 options remain: guidance, containment, or archiving. Elizabeth watched anxiously as the collectors prepared to vote. Behind her, Olivia whispered, "Signal sent. I included our coordinates." Elizabeth didn't know if help would come in time, or even if the signal had reached human space. But she had done all she could to represent humanity. Now their fate was in the hands of these ancient beings who had appointed themselves the gardeners of galactic life. "Before you vote," Elizabeth said, "remember this. No matter what you decide here today, humans will never stop trying to find their own path. It's who we are, and someday we might surprise even you." The collectors had just begun their vote when a strange alarm echoed through the council chamber. The walls, which had been showing peaceful scenes of stars and galaxies, suddenly flashed red. "Unauthorized vessels detected," announced a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Multiple human ships approaching." The collectors rose from their seats, their silver skin rippling with what might have been surprise or alarm. "Impossible," said Archiver Prime. "No signal could have penetrated our barriers." Observer 9 turned to look at Olivia, who tried to keep her face neutral. "The humans have used our own technology against us," Observer 9 said, and there was something like respect in its voice. A large viewing screen appeared in the center of the chamber. On it they could see a fleet of human ships emerging from faster-than-light travel. At the front was a massive vessel that Elizabeth recognized as Admiral Miller's flagship. "What is happening?" demanded Archiver Prime. Before Elizabeth could answer, the screen flickered and Admiral Miller's face appeared. His expression was calm but determined. "This is Admiral Frank Miller of the Earth Alliance. We have tracked our missing ship to this location. Return Captain Grant and her crew immediately, or we will take action." Elizabeth stepped forward. "Admiral, we're here in what they call the council chamber. These beings, the collectors, have been watching humanity for centuries." Miller nodded as if this wasn't news to him. "We know, Captain. We've known about them for years." This statement shocked not only Elizabeth and her crew, but seemed to surprise the collectors as well. "Explain," demanded Archiver Prime. Miller's expression remained steady. 20 years ago, we detected unusual energy patterns at the edges of our space. We formed a special group called the Boundary Protection Service to investigate. Over time, we discovered your observation posts and began studying you in return." Elizabeth couldn't believe what she was hearing. All this time, we knew they were watching us? "Only a few people knew," Miller explained. "We needed to understand what we were dealing with first. The Starseeker's mission was part of a long-term plan to force contact with the collectors." Observer 9 moved closer to the screen. "Your species should not have been capable of detecting our technology." "That's the problem with your predictions," Miller replied. "You underestimate us." Archiver Prime stepped forward. "Your presence here changes nothing. We have preserved galactic order for billions of years. Humans are simply one more species, to be guided or contained." "I don't think so," Miller said. "We've been studying the pulsars that surround human space. They're not natural formations, they're ancient defense systems." Olivia gasped. "That's why they affect alien neural patterns, but not humans. They were designed to protect us specifically." Miller nodded. "Our scientists made another discovery. The pulsars are at least 50,000 years old, but they show signs of human design principles." The chamber fell silent. Even the collectors seemed stunned by this revelation. "Impossible," whispered Archiver Prime. "Humans have only had space travel for a few centuries. Unless," Elizabeth said slowly as the pieces clicked together in her mind, "we aren't originally from Earth. What if humans lived among the stars before?" Observer 9 turned to Archiver Prime. "The progenitor theory." "A myth," Archiver Prime dismissed, but there was uncertainty in its mental voice. Miller continued, "We found ancient records buried deep in the bedrock of Mars. They tell a story of a civilization that fought against controllers of life. A civilization that was defeated but scattered its children across many worlds to ensure survival. Elizabeth felt a chill run down her spine. We're not native to Earth, are we? We're refugees. Observer 9 looked at Archiver Prime. Tell them the truth. They have earned it. After a long moment, Archiver Prime seemed to sigh. There was once a species that called themselves the progenitors. They alone refused our guidance. When we moved to archive their world, they fought back with unexpected strategies. Though they lost the war, they managed to hide some of their kind on primitive worlds throughout the galaxy. Earth was one of those worlds, Peter said in awe. Yes, Archiver Prime admitted. We erased their memories but could not change their essential nature. The neural resistance remained in their genetic code. You've been waiting for us to evolve again, Elizabeth realized, to see if we would become the same threat. We have been watching, Observer 9 agreed, waiting. And now you have returned to space, carrying the same unpredictable nature that made your ancestors so dangerous and so fascinating. Admiral Miller's voice grew firm. We're not here to fight you, but we won't be controlled or archived either. Humanity will choose its own path. The cycle repeats, Archiver Prime said quietly. After all our efforts to prevent it. A different collector stood up. Perhaps this is evolution, Archiver Prime. Not all change leads to chaos. Some change leads to growth, even for us. Observer 9 moved to stand beside Elizabeth. I have studied humans closely. They are chaotic, yes. Unpredictable, certainly. But they create things we would never imagine. Music that moves in ways our perfect mathematics cannot predict. Art that stirs feelings our efficient minds had forgotten. Perhaps they are not a threat to order, but a reminder that order without growth is just stagnation. For a long time, no one spoke. Then, slowly, Archiver Prime moved forward and addressed Elizabeth directly. For billions of years, we have guided life in this galaxy believing we knew best. Perhaps it is time for us to learn instead. The collector turned to face the screen showing Admiral Miller. We will not archive humanity, nor will we attempt to contain you. The barriers around human space will be removed. Your kind may travel freely. And what about other species? Elizabeth asked. Will you keep controlling their development? That requires further consideration, Archiver Prime admitted. Perhaps it is time for a new approach to our role as caretakers. Observer 9 stepped forward. I propose a new accord. The collectors will continue to preserve truly developing species from outside interference, but any civilization deemed ready for the galactic community will be given true independence. A compromise we can live with. Admiral Miller agreed. Elizabeth looked around at the vast chamber, at the millions of archived worlds suspended in their glowing orbs, at the ancient beings who had guided life for so long. She thought about humanity's place in all this. Descendants of rebels who refused to be controlled, now standing at the threshold of a new relationship with the galaxy. No one charts beyond human space because no one comes back, she said softly, but that changes today. Later, as the Starseeker prepared to return home, Elizabeth stood at the viewport looking out at the stars. So much had changed in such a short time. Humans weren't just another species but inheritors of an ancient legacy, guardians against well-intentioned control that stifled growth and change. Observer 9 had promised to visit Earth as an ambassador. The barriers around human space would come down, opening new regions for exploration, and the collectors had agreed to reconsider their role in galactic development. Captain, Peter said, joining her at the viewport. Do you think we can trust them? Elizabeth smiled. Trust takes time. But I think they're finally ready to learn something new. And so are we. As the stars stretched into lines of light around them, Elizabeth thought about the future waiting for humanity among the stars. It would be challenging and dangerous, but also full of wonder and discovery. The warning that once kept aliens from human space would now serve a new purpose. No one charts beyond human space because those who do never come back the same. They Return transformed by the knowledge that the universe is vaster and more complex than any single species can comprehend, and that freedom, with all its unpredictability, is worth preserving.